Well, we so appreciate this opportunity to be able to sit down with you and discuss a lot of the achievements that you've accomplished in a very short time. And from my personal perspective, one of the things I really have appreciated is the designation of full-time SWAT, like STLs and so forth, throughout the different divisions, because for so long, SWAT had been treated like the kind of redheaded stepchild. But there is a legitimate struggle between cases and tactical capability. But I think with prioritizing at least some of these senior positions like the STLs and maybe, I don't know, ATLs as well, I think that goes a long way toward balancing those two competing interests. So that's one thing that I really appreciated from your recent changes.
Well, first and foremost, thanks for being here. Welcome to DSIG, the Director of Strategic Information Group. We can get into this later, but as you can see, when I got here, it was called SIOC, and it looked nothing like this. And the purpose of this place is to give information to leadership, the interagency in the White House, in almost near live time. When I got here, that window was set at a 30-minute marker. We are now inside of 3 minutes for each and every critical incident, mass casualty, any sort of law enforcement involved incident, state, local, federal. And usually I get it within 60 seconds. And so that boils down what we've done here, but it's been a tremendous lift by the team here. So look, our tactical operators, out of every field office, 56 field offices, we got 56 SWAT teams. And of course we got our SIRG elements and our HRT folks. And I spent some time as a civilian at JSOC, and I thought, look, these guys are our tip of the spear. That's just the reality of what it is. They're kicking down the doors. They're going after the bad guys and chasing down people who are firing at them. So why would we deprive them of the kit and the tools and the resources necessary? Last year we did, I think, 2,800 SWAT ops. Which is a dramatic increase. It's the most the FBI's ever done. The high tempo of that demands a lot from the human that is doing it, from the intel folks and staff that are driving behind it. But one of my first visits was down to the Miami field office when I first got here, and I walked into the SWAT room, and there was just nods on the table, and they were 10, 15 years old. They were unscrewed. They were taken apart. And I said, guys, are we trying to go over like historical nods and where we are now? They're like, no, that's what we use now. We have to fix them, and sometimes they don't work. So I said, that's unacceptable. So we immediately solved that, and we worked with our partners at DOW and the Hill, and we said, look, our guys need nods. They're doing nighttime operations. They need to be able to see, and why that wasn't addressed before goes to what you raised. It was a larger problem. It had never been a focus. So what we did was we treated the SWAT program as an entity of SIRG in terms of funding, so that we were able to treat them as essentially what they are, a tier 1 law enforcement element. And so like JSOC funds tier 1 elements, we are now funding SIRG and SWAT through that to get them the Bearcats, to get them the drones, to get them the nods, to get them the the plates and the vest and the radios and the comms and the vehicle. So it was a massive overhaul. And that was just one way in which we were able to deliver fast results, but also listen to the field when they said, hey, what about our STLs in the field? Why can't we make them, full-time this or that? And I said, well, we can. And so we had to just work overtime to balance the FSL requirements for other needs. And we got to a good spot. And now every SWAT team is treated equally and also nested under SIRG because that way we can break out an entire chunk of funding, and then SIRG can program manage, because they're the best guys to program manage the SWAT operations rather than every single disparate field office. And we added 10 Bearcats last year.
That's awesome. I mean, to the SWAT point, when you have so much disparate control over the SWAT elements, you end up, a lot of divisions, whether they prioritize SWAT or not, it affects other divisions as well. And bringing that under SIRG, I think, is a fantastic development. And I know from Miami, my experience on Miami SWAT, that oftentimes you'd have to beg, borrow, and steal from the division, for equipment. So that's really great to hear.
We're getting, our goal has always been, from when Dan Bongino was here, and now Rhea and Chad and company, has been to listen to what the field has been saying, not since I got here, but for years, listen to your expertise. You know, we reach out to folks that served in the Bureau and said these changes are long overdue. So SWAT was just one that we addressed immediately, and we achieved what we wanted to achieve, and they're in a good place.
The one thing that I'm really appreciative of is the level of transparency that you've brought to the FBI, and the fact that you've balanced that with the protection of civil liberties. So helping the public understand that while they are desirous to know about information of what's going on with a particular case or event or something like that, you also have to protect the rights of not just the victims, but the accused, because they have due process rights. And I think you've achieved a pretty good balance on that. It's a dramatic shift from the last three directors that I worked for before I retired, which were dramatically different. But I think you're doing a really good job with that. On the SWAT aspect that John was just talking about, I just spoke with the SWAT team leader out of Jackson, Mississippi, and he was appreciative of the attention that's being given there. Especially, it's really difficult in a small office. I supervised the SWAT team when I was down there in trying to balance a very small office with limited resources and address threats as well. And I think there was a time here before you came along that SWAT may have been a little overused and used for things that they probably, it wasn't the best face for the Bureau to put out there to send this tactical team in, when it could have been done a little more low key without drawing unnecessary attention, is what I call it.
Well, you're right. Look, SWAT's the hammer, right? They don't do crowd control. That's not their job. And they don't run complex investigations. But all of our SWAT guys are 1811s that have their own caseload. So we have to balance for the enterprise. We can't take away from the mission itself of defending the homeland and crushing violent crime, because a lot of these folks are dual-hatted. But that's also why we changed the SCL program, to make sure, okay, your focus is on SWAT and what your team needs. And then what we were able to achieve was this balance in small offices or large offices. On the transparency front, look, it's the thing I learned from doing Russiagate way back in the day when I led that on the House Intel Committee was the American people does not like being told what happened in their government, especially if it was corrupt and illegal by government officials. They want to see it. And so I took that methodology and brought it here, and I said, look, as long as we are not interfering with ongoing investigations and protecting sources and protecting our partners, then I don't see a reason why we can't deliver the paperwork itself to the American people. So I think we are up to 55,000 pages of materials delivered to Congress, almost entirely unredacted. So we didn't give them those sheets that used to happen here with 40 sentences per page and 39 blocks of black ink. And so the 55,000 pages we've delivered is a 300% increase from my prior two predecessors combined. And we've done that in 14 months, and they held the seats for a total of 10 years. And so I think the American public and our oversight partners in Congress appreciate that they're getting this information, but also the American public is like, well, I can just read this on my own. You don't have to tell me what happened. And so I think that's critically important to restoring the trust of the FBI with the American public, which was severely eroded, whether it's due to weaponization, whether it's due to corruption or mismanagement of internal matters. We need to hold ourselves accountable to the people we serve, which is the American public. And that's why the Transparency Initiative is so important. It's going to go on. It's going to continue at a record pace, and we're going to continue putting out information in a methodical, safe manner while making sure we uphold the constitutional rights of those that are charged.
Well, the numbers, the numbers are irrefutable. Like critics, they want to take pot shots and say maybe you're not doing things fast enough or in the right way or whatever. But when you've got a 300% increase of producing documents, I mean, this is real effective transparency, right? The numbers speak for themselves, and it's not just that. I mean, the 113 CI or counterintelligence arrests. Yeah. I mean, to me, as a former CI agent, that's incredibly impressive, because back in the day I only could have wished for that sort of statistic to push up to headquarters and hopefully see that disseminated out in public, which back then it wouldn't have been disseminated to the public. I know people have criticized you for the social media aspects of your administration, and initially, because us older guys were used to a different front-facing FBI, but I've come to really appreciate that level of transparency, especially from the rapid response account, where I can literally look at a graphic and see exactly what the Bureau is accomplishing. And it's, of course, not just me, but everyone else, supporters, critics alike. And the other thing I wanted to touch on that you just brought up was with regard to how quickly you're being updated with current information. And when it comes to cases that we see, that make the news, like the terrorism cases, you're out there almost immediately appropriately categorizing these cases. You're not afraid to call it a terrorism case or a domestic terrorism case or whatever. And that is something we did not see from prior administrations. That was, I don't want to speak for Chris, but for me it was incredibly frustrating. Obviously this is a terrorism case, but the administration is terrified to label it as such. So I think that is one of the bigger sea changes that you have produced that that has been one of the more commendable things.
Well, look, it's just a different time. This is my 18th year in government service. I never had a Twitter handle till I got the nomination to be the director of the FBI. I didn't physically have one. But that is how and where a lot of the world, not just America, goes to obtain information. And so, you can like it or dislike it, but that's the reality. People aren't sitting down to watch the evening news at 5 p.m. every day anymore. It's just not what's happening. And so we have a great team. We change how we deliver that information, but also on a lifetime basis, because look, this is the cycle and era of we want immediate information now. And so our challenge is to balance putting out immediate information with an ongoing investigation and not having it interfere with that. And I think we've struck the right tone on major investigations and doing it out there. And I think with the CI stuff, look, it was a big problem. It continues to be a big problem. Russia, China, DPRK, and Iran. They are our biggest adversaries. And we need to tell and educate the American public that this spy problem is not just they're attacking government agencies and government targets. They're looking to collect from the American public. We need to educate them that this is going on at such a massive level and wasn't successfully program managed. So we changed that, and we are up, I think, these are just, we call them stats, but they're literally people and entities that we are disrupting and taking down. We are up 53% on counterintelligence espionage arrest in 16 months alone from the same time period in the prior administration. The actors, the threat actors in the prior administration knew they had a lot of space to play in. Now they're thinking about it again and saying, well, we actually keep getting caught. Right. And so I think the American public learned through our publicization of that these cases you normally can't talk about, but we can once we get to court. We have public indictments, they're in public trials. We can put that information out there, and it helps us educate the American public on, well, how are they trying to steal my information? What platforms are they going on? What methods are they using? And then our engagement with the private sector and the cyber missions, it's different, but it's interrelated. It's been a whole new engagement we did with Operation Winter Shield and Riptide and things like that, because the private sector is critical to helping us stop these adversarial attacks on the counterintelligence side of the house. And so those were things we just, when I got here, people were like, well, we just don't do that. And I've told folks here, and they know this, if the answer to the question I ask you is, this is how we've always done it, that is not the right answer. 99.9% of the time is not the right answer, because the times have just changed, like you highlighted. So we have to adapt with what the American public does to receive information.
I think one of the things that I want the public to understand is the way that the agendas are set, and it comes from the White House down. But I think this White House is different because they're not. I was there when President Obama came on and was working counterintelligence, and we shifted dramatically in the state of Mississippi, where I had a number of PRC, People's Republic of China cases going, and we had a significant threat there to a number of industries in Mississippi. And all of a sudden I was being told to look under every rock for a Russian. And I had been there long enough to know that we had one Russian came through. He was escorting a body from the consulate in Houston to go to Atlanta to fly out to go back to Russia. He stopped to have dinner, and that was it. But we were still being told top down, this is what to go look at. And I think now, and I haven't met President Trump personally, but I get the impression he's the type of guy, tell me what the problem is. So you've done that with the regional concept of SACs. Tell me what you see from your liaison, your tripwires, your sources of what's going on in your area. What are the significant threats that your partners are concerned about, and how can we address that? And I think you've surged enough resources to that. Some places it's violent crime that the citizens want to see taken care of, like Memphis. Some places it is counterintelligence. Sometimes it's counterterrorism, depending on the locale. But trying to, during our time in the FBI, of headquarters telling us what the threat was, rather than us saying, this is what we're seeing.
No, that's just, in my opinion, that's not the right approach. And President Trump has been the single greatest proponent of law enforcement in the White House ever. And the mandate was simple: go safeguard America, protect the homeland, and get our cities cleaned up from these violent criminal acts and gangs and traffickers and narco traffickers. And so the mandate was simple: go do it. Figuring out how to do it is a little more complex, but it speaks to what you were saying. You know, when I first got here, the NCR, the National Capital Region, had 1/3 of the FBI's entire workforce worked and lived in the NCR. Right. But 1/3 of the crime doesn't happen here. It just didn't make sense to me. This wasn't anything that was some sort of genius thought process. We have, 50 states, all these territories, all our extraterritorial work. So I took 1,000 1811s and I permanently moved them out of the NCR and pushed them across the field. This year we took 250 intel analysts, took them out of the director of intelligence, which we revamped, put them in the field, because intel drives ops in the field. On top of that, we shredded the diag, we reduced it by 40%, removing the bureaucracy that had created these jobs and institutionalized these jobs, and said, you have to come to DC, you have to get our approvals, and you have to get a DC to do your promotions. We got rid of all that too. Your promotions are made in the field. If you want to come to DC, we got plenty of work. If that's where you want to be, we got tons of work here. But we shrunk that footprint. We're going to continue to shrink that footprint. And then we empowered the SACs. I made this a big pillar of our approach to fighting crime. You guys are in charge. Miami is different than Juneau, Alaska, which is different than Des Moines, which is different than Dallas, Texas. And you don't have to be in law enforcement to know that. And so we did that and pushed out those resources and we're going to continue that push. That's not a one-time offset. We want the majority of people that work in the FBI out in the field. Of our 36,000, I found it absurd that 12,000 and change lived and worked in the NCR. Made no sense to me. So we changed that model. And I think the results speak for themselves. When you drop the murder rate 20 points in 1 year, which has never been done before, that's not headquarters driving the ops. That's the field agents and the SACs and the intel analysts and support staff in the field saying, we're going to take care of St. Louis, we're going to take care of Memphis, we're going to take care of, pick your city. And I think you've seen the success. When you take, I think last year we arrested 45,000 violent offenders, we being the FBI. To put it in perspective, that's twice as many violent offenders that were arrested in the last year of the Biden administration. Those just speak for themselves. We have rid the cities of 45,000 violent offenders in a 12-month cycle. And those numbers keep going up and up for this calendar year. And so we're going to continue that.
What do you say to critics that will say, well, okay, those numbers, they're impressive numbers, but that's primarily like TFO activity or other partners?
No, they can say that. They can say whatever they want. Right. These are just FBI-driven numbers. When you add in the interagency, when you add in the HSTFs, when you add in the JTTFs, the numbers go even higher, even bigger. And the TFO thing, I'm glad you raised that. It was another one of these changes we made when I got here, and I'd worked these matters when I was on the JTTF in New York and a terrorism prosecutor before. And it was like 12 to 14 months to onboard a TFO, and you guys know this. You guys did it. Our best partners in the field are cops. Absolutely. We want more cops. Mm-hmm. Whatever you call the task force doesn't matter. But it was a 14-month onboard from when they applied to become a TFO to get on, because everybody required them to have a TS clearance, which made no sense to me. So we got rid of that. Everybody gets a secret clearance. If you need a TS, we'll get it to you. And I reduced the pipeline from 14 months to 60-day max. Mm-hmm. We had a 750-person TFO backlog when I got here. We're now at 0. And on top of that, the last remaining hurdle we had was the SACs were complaining, well, this is great, but we still need to deputize them when they get to the finish line. Right. So now we changed that. So now every SAC in the field is in charge of their own deputizations. They do them there. And that's the difference.
Go ahead. Well, one of the other things I want to commend is, and it's been a complaint of those of us in the retirement community, is bringing back the, I had a friend of mine call it the myth of the FBI agent, and the myth usually led, when you show up, you look the part, you act the part, and people will believe the part, and it brings a sense of not just prestige, but it brings a sense of comfort to the victims when they see somebody professional showing up. I think we went through a time before you came along where I used to cringe every time I saw a Ring doorbell camera with somebody in cargo pants, hiking boots, untucked polo shirt, and trying to convince somebody that they're an FBI agent. And I grew up with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and the suit and all of that. And I used to try to educate the younger agents. I said, listen, you need to show up, you need to look the part. When you walk into the room, they need to know that you're in charge. I said, when people show up for the bank robberies and they're looking for who's in charge, looking for the guy in the suit. And I said, it's not just the suit itself, it's what you represent. And the answer that I usually got from the younger agents was, well, I want to have them at a comfort level that I'm equal to them. And I said, listen, I'm telling you from 25 years of conducting interrogations, it's easier to take somebody from a tense standpoint and bring them down than it is to come in at this level and go the other way. And I said it's more productive that way. And I tried to comport myself that way, even if I was sitting, and I've done this, sitting in a trailer in Sumter, South Carolina, interviewing a guy that was violating intellectual property rights of multi-million-dollar corporations. I'm in a suit, sitting at the table talking to him. I want him to know that I'm in charge. And that suit carries that. People recognize it. Quick story, I was at the old Lorton prison. We used to have to work crimes on government reservation cases when we were coming up on probation. And I was with an assistant U.S. attorney, and we were walking across the courtyard. And he could hear the prisoners mumbling, FB1's in the house, FB1's in the house. And he said, how did they know? And I said, I don't know, they just figure it out. And he goes, well, what are you gonna do if they try to do something to us? And I said, hey, what I'm going to do is, what are you going to do? Because I'm going to push you down and run away. But he kind of laughed at that, got him to calm down. But that, I think you're bringing that back in compass with, and I know Director Ray had disbanded the DEI programs, but the problem was still there. And you had to face that problem when you came on. And I like the idea of looking at what tools these people can bring, new agents can bring to the FBI, and it's not based on immutable characteristics like race and gender and things like that. So I commend that it's going to take a little while, but there is a shift in the caliber.
I think you're seeing it. Look, it has to start with our recruiting, right? We are losing too many quality candidates to the rigors of the requirements from yesteryear. Okay, so we just introduced and rolled out our GS9 program. If you've been a cop for a year and you have an interest in the FBI, no more 2-year requirement window after college. Come on in. Quantico is going to screen you out if you can't make it. Same with members of the military. We want those folks. We want college athletes. We want them here. And we want to give them a pay that they can afford to live as a young American while doing this awesome job. And the other problem we had with the recruiting pipeline and Quantico itself was it took you over a year to just even get from A to B before you even got into Quantico. We had the human side of the house is something we have tremendously focused on here. Taking care of the people and taking care of the admin. We shrunk that by 100 days because we just eliminated the need for, why do you have to wait 90 days from your phone call to your appointment? Nothing happens in that time period except you lose quality candidates. Because the folks that do meet the level that you're talking about, they're like, well, I got a job offer with this and this agency or state, local, federal. I'm going to go do that because I can't wait forever. So we shrunk that pipeline. We're finally seeing recruiting numbers. We've never had recruiting numbers and application numbers this high in the history of the Bureau. We're not reducing our standards. We're actually making it harder. You got to be fit to be an FBI agent. But it's not just agents. You got to recruit intel analysts. You got to recruit support staff. You got to recruit lab officials and technical officials. We raised the salaries for the first time ever of forensic accountants because we couldn't recruit forensic accountants, and it made no sense to me. So we raised their pay to bring them in. We need forensic accountants to do this complex fraud investigations that we've had so much success with. So when you take on the non-tangible sides of the house that no one ever talks about because they just said it's worked and it's going to continue to work, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. And for the first time ever, irrespective of what the three of us say, the FBI has not had a budgetary increase in 6 years. This is the first year OMB came back with a passback number of a significant budgetary increase, and if Congress approves it, it'll be the highest budget the FBI has ever had, because we're showing them through transparency, through the people we're bringing in, and the work product itself, that this mission can work at a higher level, and it needs a little more funding, and we're finally getting it so we can take care of the people on the onboard once they get here, and also on the back end when they retire. We owe them that. We owe our folks that have dedicated 10, 20, 30 years of their life to this mission that they be treated the way they need to be treated. And so we're doing that. Little things like 1811s used to not be able to keep their service pistol. Now you can. We used to melt them down. Made no sense to me. Sorry. Well, we'll find yours if we can and get them back to you.
It used to drive me nuts to see these weapons just get tossed aside, thrown in
little things like that just made no sense to me, and it was just the policy. We changed the policy. Well, we have a great Attorney General in Todd Blanche, who is one of the best partners the FBI has ever had. And every time I bring him a problem, 99% of the time, he's like, well, I need you to do that because this is a job we've been charged to do. And I need less paperwork, less bureaucracy. I don't need to make the mission less safe. I need you to raise the bar of how we do it and who we bring in, but figure out a way to remove the morass. And that's what we did when we took on the DIOG, for example, and took 40% out of it. It just didn't need to be there. It's just institutionalized bad habits that we got rid of.
The touching back on the recruitment process of being able to balance shortening the process, taking out the unnecessary hurdles. A lot of that is administrative, just the slowness of bureaucracy, but at least keeping the standards where they need to be and raising them when needed. Because one of the things that I tell my kids and tell others that are interested in the FBI, it's an achievement. It's not go get a job and I'm going to work for government for a couple of years.
It's not easy to get in here.
There's very few people that get in. It's a very exclusive, select club. And once you get in, I want you to be proud of it, that it's something that you've achieved. And then once you're on the inside, recognizing the awesome responsibility you have at protecting civil liberties, literally the one thing that you swear an oath to do. I'm happy to hear that the FBI agents are recognizing that again, the sincerity of that oath. I will say, from a personal standpoint, I wish some of our elected representatives would understand that oath. But I appreciate that you're bringing back that it is something that's an achievement. And I used to enjoy. My dad used to brag about, I loved when people would ask me what you do, and they would tell them. And then we had a period of time where I was kind of nervous about telling them what you did.
Well, that's the thing that we need to fix, and we have addressed it head on. And the attacks to the media and the false reporting doesn't help the mission. I don't care what they say about me, whatever. But you're hurting the field, you're hurting the agents, you're hurting the intel analysts, you're hurting the support staff, you're hurting the mission. When I go around the country and I talk to police officers and law enforcement and agents and retired law enforcement, they're the ones coming up to me and telling me that the changes we have made have been long overdue. Thank you for making them. Agents in the field are constantly messaging me and saying, thank you for making these changes. We listened to them. We didn't just make this stuff up. We said, what do you guys need to do your jobs? Putting aside the fact that we're going to resource you correctly, what do you need from an admin and human capital standpoint? And what do you need from an administrative standpoint? And we did that across the board, which is why you're seeing applicant numbers go through the roof. And then having a pull-up requirement, we got a lot of heat for that. I'm not asking you to be a special forces operator, but if you want to be an agent, you can do one pull-up. If we're going to chase down a bad guy with a gun on your hip, then you're going to have to be able to do one pull-up. It's a rigorous standard for law enforcement, and we're going to hold to it. And if you want to come in and then become a tactical operator in HRT and SWAT, well, there's different quals for that, and you can go through that process. But we're not lightening the load. The workload and the training load is more rigorous than it's ever been because of what you said. Because when they get out there into the field, they represent the FBI, and they have to carry themselves accordingly. It's not just in their appearance, but in their physical fitness and how they present themselves to the American public. The thing we did, last year's campaign was a national focus on how we've delivered and changed for the FBI. This year's focus, if you ask my team, is a regional focus. The one thing I learned is more people watch and listen to regional media and social media than they do national TV. If you look around now, name a period in the time of the FBI's history where you've seen an SAC behind a podium so often in the field, given press conferences. It's not their expertise necessarily, but they've taken the time to learn how to do it. We installed a program to help them how to do it, because we didn't just say, go ahead and do this. We're here to help you. We're here to train you on that as well, because the American public should be hearing about the takedowns and the massive achievements that you're having. You know, one of the biggest problems we have had in this country was localized street gangs. You know, it's the underbelly of both the gun trade and the drug trade. And I'm not talking MS-13s and Tren de Araguas. That's a separate issue that we've handled under the authorities we've been given by the president, thankfully, on the FTO. But we have taken down, I think, something like 2,800 criminal gangs in 1 year. Never been done before. And that has allowed the cities to be cleansed of guns and drugs and thugs. Those three, when you take those three things out, your parks are a lot safer, your communities are a lot safer, your kids are a lot safer. And they are. They just are. You cannot see a reduction in drug overdoses by 20% if what we're doing is not working. This is what I always ask the rhetorical question to the media in Congress. They don't have an answer for. If everything we're doing is wrong, if all these changes are political, as you say, and personal, as you say, then how is it that the FBI has never been this successful?
Right.
They don't have an answer for it.
And getting back to the transparency, and you touched on this with having the SACs behind the podium. I know we went for a while when I first came into the Bureau in the late 90s that, you know, there was actual training to not just SACs, but actual field supervisors. I went through a 2-week supervisor's course, and we had to stand up and give presentations as if we were conducting a press conference. And then for a while, we got away from that when it was the headquarters down focus. And I think there was an art form to that was lost. And now I'm happy to hear that you're bringing that back, so that
it's going on right now. We've got 8 SACs downstairs doing a 3-day program on just that.
Okay.
So we're keeping it going.
And I like the fact that, and I've pointed this out on television and in print, is don't just do the one press conference when the big event happens and then it's radio silence. Even if you have nothing to say, have somebody. It doesn't have to be the SAC. The PIO could come up and just speak and say, we don't have any new information. We're going to reiterate where we're at right now and what we're working on. And I think that transparency doesn't infringe on the constitutional rights of individuals, but at the same time comforts the public that, hey, something is happening and they are actively
and
working
finding the right time to do it. Because whether it's, you know, if you look at December of last year, we disrupted 4 active ongoing terrorism attacks. We stopped them cold. California, Florida, New York, and I think Texas. 30 days, we stopped 4 terror attacks. And we notified the public at the right time. And the critics want it both ways. Oh, you notified us too soon. Or you didn't notify us at all. Well, we actually succeeded in disrupting the terror attacks completely, safeguarding the mission and our personnel, rolled these guys up. Now they're in prison, and the public knew almost immediately. And if you roll it back right to the UFC 250 events, people were like, well, why are you telling us now, was the criticism. Because we arrested 8 people and they're making their first appearance in court, so it's public anyway, and we didn't hurt the rest of the operation. As you guys have seen, we've been arresting people every week since UFC 250 for the threat stream related to UFC 250. So the balance has been struck, I think, at the highest, most prominent level in terms of, when you talk high profile, you're talking about the biggest sporting event ever at the White House on the lawn, and we were able to safeguard it and tell the world and the American public how we did it and what we were able to do at the right time.
Well, a lot of these people, a lot of the criticism that's coming are coming from individuals that don't have any access and that don't have expertise. So it's very easy for someone on social media just to propound, you know, some sort of preposterous theory or opinion with regard to, you know, complex operational activities. But to circle back a little bit about the FBI employee and your focus on employees, you know, in the beginning, you were sort of an unknown entity to me. But when you made that statement after your confirmation about, you know, you don't care what people say about you, you know, you're there to defend the reputation and the work of the agents out on the street. When you made that comment, that really solidified to me that this is a guy that I can get behind. This is a guy I can support, because so many at the time, you know, were clamoring for defund the FBI, you know, abolish the FBI, all this nonsense, right? I mean, America needs the FBI. America needs an FBI being led appropriately, and in my opinion, led appropriately by you, and then they'll get the FBI that they deserve. You know, I like to talk about, well, let's make the FBI great again. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, we just replace the leadership.
Yeah, personnel is everything. You know that. We've replaced all senior personnel. We've redone the organizational charts here because they were built for the 1980s and 90s, and they weren't built for the modern day. And that's just something that had to be done. It wasn't anything personal. And the reason that we had to do all this was exactly what you said. We had to change with the times. The American public saw us changing with the times and didn't glom on to hyperbolic statements of defund the police and get rid of the FBI. The FBI went through a severe erosion of public trust because of the weaponization of the past actors, because of the politicization. But us going after those folks is not retribution. Us going after those folks who they themselves failed to uphold the law and their oaths is how we are restoring public trust in it. It's the very thing I promised to do at my confirmation. And of course we're going to get heat because we're destroying the political narratives, the false ones that have been created. Everything from Russiagate to things like that are ongoing, like the investigations, this is public obviously, involving Jack Smith and everything else. Yeah, those, now what did we just hear from Senator Grassley? Thanks to our transparency initiative, a number of senators, I think it was 40, were text messages and phone calls were surveilled by the Department of Justice, sitting United States members of the House and the Senate. In what world is that okay?
Right.
You know, are you telling me Chairman Grassley and his counterparts are criminals? No, that's the weaponization of the FBI that we are now exploiting and showing to the American public. And then, of course, the last piece is the accountability piece. And I know everybody wants it yesterday, but you guys know better than anything. It takes a little bit of time to break decades of institutionalized weaponization, expose the corruption, and then the last piece is holding them accountable, which we are working overtime on. And I've promised the American public, just look at our track record. We're doing it across the board. The hardest lift, and one that we are and will succeed on, is exposing those that worked in government, that they themselves generated the biggest politically charged, baseless operations in FBI history. And when we hold those people accountable, then we'll have completed, I think, the mission.
And this is something I've experienced with at least one past director, and we can talk offline about which one that was, what happened. I'm a big proponent, as are a lot of people in mine and John's circles, that publicly praise, constructive criticism in private, not putting it out there, because what we see from some former FBI agents, not retired ones, that they want to come out and they want to provide that criticism and lead with that, and then John and I are adept enough to look at it and say, well, that's just a grift. You're just trying to cultivate clicks or likes or whatever, and you guys have been doing good at just kind of ignoring that and letting it kind of die on the vine. But I get the impression that you're okay with your leadership team coming in and saying, boss, I don't think that's a good idea.
I ask for it every day.
That is a refreshing thing to hear from...
every single day I demand that of my assistant directors, my operational directors, my ADD, my deputies. I ask that every single day. You guys are in the field, you're in touch, you do the work, they call you. Also go around, you guys should do it. Call the SACs. See if they have ever had this much direct contact with the director of the FBI. I call them every week. And I talk to them, I say, hey, what's working in Denver? What's not working in Denver? Did this policy change we make, is that effective for you in the field? And not just for agents, for your entire workforce. And if it's a problem in Denver, it's probably going to be a problem in Omaha, and it's probably going to be a problem in Maine. And my leadership team also knows to be doing the same thing, because these folks were our career agents, our career FBI staff, and they have reach, like you guys do, to these criticisms. So sometimes we'll have an idea and they'll be like, I don't think this one's going to work, or we'll roll it out and be like, we need to change it left or right. I said, when we make these changes, they're not permanent, they're not set in stone. We are going to adapt to how the field reacts to them, because we got the change idea from the field. When I do a field office visit, I don't think any FBI director has done this. I kick out all the leadership, and I meet with the frontline supervisors, and then I meet with senior personnel. And there's not one ASAC or SAC in the room. And I give them as much time as I can give them to say, it's the most important feedback I get.
Yeah, that's a good
It's the most important feedback I get. because they're honest, they're open, there's no retribution, there's no wrong question or answer. I want that information to get to my team. I take it back here, and then we say, wow, we weren't tracking that. And so I think if you ask the careers that are here, they'll tell you that process is working. And also, we're moving faster than we've ever done, faster than we've ever moved. And we're not cutting corners. I said, we can't do that. The mission requires us to maintain the integrity of the mission, but the current times demand that we move with the speed of the adversary.
Yeah. If I could ask real quick about FISA.
Yeah.
And I know people are very concerned about it. It is the FISA warrant process. It is a warrant process. I understand 702 is a little bit different, complicated, but I really enjoyed your fix, your really simple fix in Government Gangsters for some of the issues with FISA court and the failure of the Bureau to provide exculpatory information and all that type of thing. The streamlining of the dialogue, has that altered for the Bureau FISA policy at all? Was that addressed?
It's a combination of the two. So FISA is a little bit of a different animal, as you guys know, but it also suffered from the same overkill from administration that the rest of your search warrant and Title III process or what have you, right? Getting a promotion, anything like that. So what we did was we came in and I said, do not bring me one FISA package that does not have every piece of exculpatory information that you can possibly obtain. And I literally built that into every package. It is front and center. This is the DROG we have, this is the exculpatory information we have, this is the information in between, we don't know which way it goes. We are upfront about it, and because we're responsible for that. It's a powerful tool that keeps our nation safe. And so we also, there used to be a 3-strike rule on, in terms of whether you're talking queries or just access to FISA data. There's no 3 strikes. You're trained. You know what you're doing. If you misspell a name, okay, we got you. Some of these selectors are complicated, no problem. But you're out. And we've also made it where during the FISA process and the warrant and application process where I don't need 4,000 people looking at it. I need the smartest folks looking at it, making the correct decisions, and then partnering with DOJ ultimately to get it across the finish line. And so that's another thing that we've streamlined. We've also, we won't have a chance to talk about it today, but the modernization of the FBI is maybe the thing I'm most proud of. When I got here, we had 2 AI use cases, 2. We just hit our 110th. I went out to the private sector. We got AI at CGIS. I got AI at NTOC. I got AI on our classified systems and our unclassified systems. We just launched an app on people's phones, Copilot app with AI on it to help them put together documents and research and things like that. We are bringing in technology. We are fixing our entire backbone infrastructure because for the last 10, 20 years, nobody did anything. They just put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound and said, well, this is a patchwork, we can fix it. We literally scuttled it and have brought in the IBMs, the Googles, the Metas, the Microsofts, and the AI partners that are out there on the large language models and said, we need you in. And you know what they said? We're going to come in. We're going to come in at a huge discount because we agree with your mission, and we owe that to the field. And so the modernization of this place, so we can give the same toolkit to Bangor, Maine, as we do to Louisville, Kentucky, as we do to San Francisco, California, that's the standard. And if you talk to the people here now, the amount of tech modernization we have done has been maybe the most impressive feat we've done. And the fact that we're doing it on all 3 of our enclaves, which has never been done before, and people said we couldn't do, we're achieving that mission. So the AI and the modernization on the tech with the private sector has been maybe one of the best things we've done.
That's a nice thing to hear coming from someone that we didn't have cell phones in the FBI when I came in. So we just had a calling card. If I needed to call the office, I could pull over to a payphone and dial a number, the Let's card and all of that stuff. It was a different time. But the tempo of the FBI is what I like to hear that is coming back. There was a concern of mine for a period of time. This was during the past administrations. I said, I was here at WFO on 9/11. I responded to the Pentagon that Tuesday, and there was a point that if somebody had asked me, do you think that the FBI could respond and at that tempo that we did on 9/11, and I said, I don't know if the caliber of the people are there. like they were then. We didn't complain about the 18-hour days. I mean, I left my squad in September. I didn't see it till February, and and I've lost 3 of my best friends to cancer since then. I get checked out every year for cancer because of my exposure there, and I just looked at that tempo, and I'm starting to get a little more comfort that that tempo could be achieved again if we had a major event. I hope that the caliber of the agents coming in keeps supplementing that, and we get back to that myth of the FBI agent that when you walk in, they know who you are, they know what you're about, and that you've got individuals that go out there and put their country first, Constitution first, civil rights.
Yeah, to achieve that, that's a major goal of ours, and I think we have achieved and are going to continue to achieve it. One, we've talked about the human side of the house and the admin side of the house and the onboarding and the applications in Quantico. But to continue to achieve that, you have to do this. You have to present a command center that you see in the movies. If you saw this place 14 months ago, you'd laugh at it. And the fact that it took me, in my first week, I asked for a secure call with the Attorney General when I was in the vehicle. It took him 45 minutes to make that connection.
Yeah.
That is laughable and also absurd. And it wasn't a knock on any of the people that are here. They were never given the resources to make the changes. So we did that. And if you look at, can we answer to a critical incident? Just look at every critical incident that we have already responded to. We stood up for the first time ever, the Joint Mission Center. It's here. The Joint Mission Center is literally solely responsible for detecting and stopping threats like UFC 250. We, the FBI, brought in our interagency partners under NSPM 7 and put it right here along with the National Coordination Center and our Five Eyes partners and our classified components. And because we stood that up and took the time to build places like this and co-locate people, we are now able to operate at that tempo. When there's a critical incident, Scott and his team have a strike card for me in 60 seconds. This is where it happened. This is our resources. This is how far away they are. We're the lead. State and locals are the lead. They need ERT. This is why we're able to launch fixed wing assets within the hour. This is why you've seen HRT on the ground in record speed. This is why you're seeing, what did we just hit, our 25th foreign transfer of custody for the last month alone?
Right.
When was the last time the FBI ever did 25 FTOCs in 1 month?
Never.
We have reach around the world with our partners thanks to the Trump administration because we got WASTA with them, and we are bringing back fraudsters in record time. We're bringing back terrorists in record time, narco traffickers in record time. We're going, this week alone, we're running 3 separate FTOCs. It is incredible that we are able to do that, but what it speaks to is the intangibles that we fixed, the mechanics, the componentry of this place. Take care of the people first, but also at the same time take care of how and where they operate and listen to them and say, what do you guys need? We need co-location. We need better response time on fixed wing assets. We need better rotary, things like that, and we're doing that. And the Joint Mission Center is an incredible achievement that never existed before, is a permanent fixture now of the FBI, which is why we're able to critically respond to critical incidents in record speed. And you see it. Name a critical incident in the last 14, 15 months that has happened where the FBI has not been on the ground within literally minutes.
Right.
And then flying resources in, moving evidence response teams, bringing in the SABTs, bringing in the K9s, bringing in HRT, bringing in SWAT. We do it round the clock, and that's why the regional coverage is so impressive for me and so important for me, because they're showing the communities the FBI that we have built, and they are now seeing and feeling and touching it and saying, wow, these guys are here, these guys and gals are here, and they're here in record time.
Yeah, I think that, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but the stark contrast to what I saw in the response to Butler, Pennsylvania. Now, there are times when the FBI lends resources to state and local law enforcement. You've been really good and upfront about that. Hey, we're in a support role here, and we're providing this information. And there are times when the FBI is supposed to be, actually, according to statute, is supposed to be in charge. And when you're in charge, you're in charge. And without even having access to any of the Butler, Pennsylvania information, John and I have talked about this, and we're able to observe from the outside, and it was clear that the FBI did not take a leadership role in that in investigating it. They subcontracted to other state and local law enforcement. Okay, get us your information. No, there should be one repository for the case. The FBI works it. You work with us. We dictate how things are going to be conducted, and I think we saw that a lot of things were missed in the investigation, not just in the investigation, but I mean what was happening out in Butler. And I think there's been a dramatic change with that, with what we saw at UFC 250.
Yeah. I mean, look, when we're the lead, we're the lead. That's what I tell people. When we're not the lead, We're in a support role. Nancy Guthrie case is a perfect example. That is a state and local matter. We don't ever want to overstep and do something that we're not. That's why we have law enforcement partners. That's why the relationships with law enforcement. If you go around and ask major city chiefs, ask NAPO, ask NSA, ask any of the fraternal organizations of police and law enforcement around the country, we have never had better partnerships with them than we do now. And state and local PDs, we have never had better partnerships than we do it now. Indian country, it has never been a priority for this FBI. It is a priority, and we are kicking ass in Indian country, and it's awesome because it is a part of the country that most people don't see or touch, but they are equally impacted by violent crime and gangs and trafficking and kids that are being brutally violated and assaulted, and we can't ignore that. So that's our lead mission. We're the lead there, and we can't not be there. And so we've made that priority abundantly clear. When we respond and we're the lead, and we're going to let you know it. But we cannot do this job without our partners, whether we're the lead or whether we're in support. Right. Our partners across law enforcement are the most important resource we have. And I've made that the priority everywhere I go. Even when we're talking overseas stuff. Look at what we're doing in China. We literally went to Beijing for the first time in 11 years. Nobody had been there for the FBI. And we got the fentanyl precursors turned off, saving tens of thousands of lives thanks to President Trump's engagement with Xi Jinping. Never could have happened before. The work on scam centers, we won't even be able to get into that today, but we're taking down scam centers in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, and we've already done $14 billion in scam centers, scuttling and disruptions. Think about the senior citizens that will not be victimized of their life savings because of this work we're doing. We're doing so much of a mission that people don't recognize that we're the lead. Nobody else is going to do it, and we are statutorily the lead, so we're doing it. And we're trying to advertise. And I say this to the folks here, you guys know this better than anyone. Nobody joins the FBI to show off what they do. They just don't. Right. But, my job is to show it off. My job is to showcase their work and show the American people that this is what they're doing for you, not just coast to coast, but around the entire globe. And, one day we'll have to sit down, and we could probably spend an hour on just the cyber work that we never got into, but it's been an impressive campaign on the cyber front and protecting our critical infrastructure and engaging with private sector directly in ways that we've never done before. And the cyber mission has never been more successful.
I just want to highlight something you said real quick. When you're talking about how important those local partnerships are, how actually critical they are, I get asked that Nancy Guthrie question a lot. Why doesn't the FBI just come in and take over? And people don't get, without those local partnerships, the Bureau really is tremendously handicapped. So I was glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, it's, state cases are state cases, local cases are local cases. That's why we got sheriffs and PCs and police departments and tribal officers, but our cases are ours and our investigations are ours, and we're always going to offer assistance, whether we're in the lead or not.